Everyone, welcome to another edition of The Bullet. My name is Paul Lathrop. I'm the Deputy Director of New Media for the Second Amendment Foundation. Joining me today, as he does every other Tuesday, Craig Deluz, fresh off his broadcast, The Rundown, that runs just before this one does on Ops Lens. Craig, thanks for joining me today, man.
Always a pleasure to be with you, my friend.
We get Facebook hooked up here. Facebook makes me wait until we're actually live before it'll give me access to social media commentary. But there we go. We're all hooked up. I want to mention as we get started, if you want to comment on any of the topics we're talking about, comment on the Polite Society podcast, Facebook or YouTube feed, and those get in right away. If you're watching us anywhere else, OpsLens or anywhere else, go to Twitter, tweet with the hashtag #TheBullet. And we'll get those comments on the air as well. It's like everything's hooked up. We're ready to go. Get to our first story. And this one, I wish I could say it was surprising. It's not. It is good news. We haven't done a show since Friday. I couldn't get a lot of guests for the weekend show. And so I figured I'd pack it in. And I couldn't get anybody to show up for either the Bullet or Polite Society on Monday. So this is the first time I broadcasted since Friday. So this is still new news. Pennsylvania decision came down that Pennsylvania is one of several states that overlays the NICS check with their own state background check system. And it has been plugged up and slow and clogged up. And off of Bearing Arms article by John Petrolino that hit. Apparently, there's a state judge that has said it's taking too long. This is borderline unconstitutional, and has given the Firearm Owners Against Crime Institute for Legal Legislation and Educational Association a win in state court, saying they shouldn't have to do this. They shouldn't have to wait this long, that the duplication process is unnecessary.
Well, California is also a point of contact state. And what they argue oftentimes is, well, the reason why it takes them sometimes a little bit longer is because they don't just do the NICS background check, but they check California records. They check, there's an armed prohibited persons list here in California that they're supposed to check. They're supposed to check the courts. So they go through a little bit more of an extended process. But even with that, we had a chance to have California DOJ in court at one point telling us that, the average background check basically takes about 5 minutes or less than, let me clarify, less than 5 minutes.
Okay. On average, though, right?
On average, less than 5 minutes.
Yeah. So
there's some cases where what'll happen is, so let's say you got arrested, and what'll happen is maybe it was either the charges were dropped and they just they didn't bother putting it into the system, or in some cases charges were never filed, and they'll want to check on that to see what the adjudication of that process was. Interesting story. There was a guy who's now insurance commissioner in California, very liberal Democrat, who had a bill that made it so that it was easy to expunge if you were arrested and never charged. It was a way in which you could go about having that removed from your record. Now, his goal was to make it so that it wouldn't affect your employment. But in essence, what it also did was it also made it so that with that being removed, it could speed up your background check when you're going to purchase a firearm. And he hated every time I would come in and I would testify in favor of his bill. He's like, "We're not making it easier for people to buy guns." My response was, "Yes, you are. And thank you."
Yes. Oh.
That was an unintended partnership between the Firearms Policy Coalition and former Assemblyman Ricardo Lara.
Okay. One of the very, very few.
Well, no, don't get me wrong. He hated it. He hated that the bill had that side benefit, but it did.
Yeah. Next story I want to talk about, and I gotta hand it to AWR Hawkins. Oh, by the way, just side note here, we're into September. The 30th of September coming up is AmCon. And if you're in Second Amendment media, you need to be there. AWR Hawkins is going to be our keynote speaker for AmCon. He did a great piece on Breitbart today. And oh, by the way, Craig, you're going to be speaking at AmCon too. Um, but yeah, AWR, she's Governor Hochul's office basically said the reason we're making so many places sensitive places is the fallacy that a good guy with a gun ever stops a bad guy with a gun. So AWR was able to get to her office and say, look, does that mean you're giving up all the good guys with guns protecting you? And I'm grateful he was able to get through to her office, period. And of course, the answer was it was no comment. And of course, she's not going to give up her security detail. But I love it that he was able to get through to the office, ask the question, and write a story about it.
Well, exactly. Once again, first of all, they completely ignore every single story that is out there that does, in fact, include good guys with guns. As we know, firearms are used about 2 million times a year in self-defense. They just don't often have to be fired in self-defense. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes, they just simply need to be present in order to have the positive impact. So they don't want to talk about any of that. They don't want to talk about the times when it's fired. And oh, by the way, it took what would have or could have been a mass shooting or a mass casualty event involving firearms and turn it into just an incident involving firearms because they were able to put an end to it early enough. They don't want to talk about that. And they also don't, and at the same time, they don't want to talk about the fact that, well, gee, if armed people don't make a difference in one's self-defense, then why do you need armed people around you? It's real easy to say. It's real easy to say that I don't need a gun when I have armed professionals full-time surrounding me with guns to protect me.
Yeah, and I believe that she has 24-hour protection from the New York State Police, and there may be an additional security provided for her. But I know for a fact the New York State Police has an assigned troopers to her at all times. So yeah, it's real easy to sit on your high horse and say, well, these things just don't work, and you little people, just get over it. Meanwhile,
well, you did hear the story. You did hear the story about her opponent was attacked on stage by a guy with a knife.
Mm-hmm. I heard that.
Luckily, they were able to get a hold of him and disarm him. But I'm like, maybe I'm like a good guy with a gun probably could have made a difference there. But once again, my point is that people are 99.9% of people who own or possess firearms will never have to use them in self-defense. But it's that 0.1% who may need to use it in self-defense. They have a fundamental right to be able to possess it in self-defense. And she should know that because, well, she's exercising that right. Well, we're paying for her to be able to exercise that right, even though she doesn't have one that we know of. She surrounds herself with people who do.
And I would bet, and these are not public record, and I'm grateful they're not. However, if concealed weapons permits were public record, I would be willing to bet that Kathy Hochul has one in her name.
Yep.
And I'm just side note, this did not make it to the stories I put on the list that I wanted to talk about, but I did catch a brief snippet earlier today. Dr. Oz is running for Senate in Pennsylvania, and his opponent in that race briefly made the news because there were 2 children shooting off bottle rockets in his neighborhood. He thought they were gunshots. He looks out the window and he sees a person jogging down the street in front of his house heading towards a school. He immediately thinks this must be a bad guy, grabs his shotgun, chases the guy down, holds the guy at gunpoint, and the police show up, and this is just a jogger, and that was just fireworks. There was no gunshots. He had the wrong guy, and basically took the law into his own hands, which we preach all the time. Don't ever take the law into your own hands. And we almost had another Muhammad Aubrey uh, story today.
Why does this not surprise me? Once again, by the way, folks, this is not a good guy with a gun. This is a bad guy with a gun.
Yes.
Or an idiot with a. How about that? An idiot with a gun.
Yes. An idiot with a gun who happens to be running for Senate in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, that is actually kind of scary. And he was looking to try and make the news, is I'm going to guess.
Oh, because he stopped the bad guy that was going to go take down the school. Yeah, right. Of course, maybe he didn't hear that a good guy with a gun never stops a bad guy with a gun. Maybe he hadn't heard that yet.
If he understood that, he probably wouldn't have tried to do that.
All right. We have a press release I want to get to next. This is from SAF. Attorneys representing the Second Amendment Foundation and its partners in the case of Jones versus Bonta, challenging a California law restricting rights of young adults to purchase long guns, are asking the Ninth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals for an all writ enjoining the state from enforcing a new state law that penalizes plaintiffs in cases contesting state gun laws. SAF has a whole bunch of people joining of I can't talk today, of groups joining them, among them Cal Guns, Firearms Policy Foundation, Firearms Policy Coalition, North County Shooting Center, BB Family Arms and Munitions, Poway Weapons and Gear, and PWG Range, and then the list goes on and on, but I did want to get those first several in. According to the All Writs petition, the case concerns California laws that restrict rights of 18 to 20-year-old law-abiding adults to purchase long guns. Plaintiffs seek a declaration that these restrictions violate the Second Amendment to the U.S. Constitution and a preliminary and permanent injunction against their enforcement. And I want to skip down towards the end here. We're taking this unusual step because of the chilling effect this new law has on challenges to state gun laws, said SAF founder and executive vice president Alan Gottlieb. Section 2 of the new statute is preempted by the supremacy clause of the U.S. Constitution. It violates the First Amendment, which, among other things, protects the right of the people to petition the government for a redress of grievances. So basically, in this law, if I'm understanding this story right, it's not only can 18 to 20-year-olds not buy firearms in California, it's also in the laws you can't sue us over this. Am I reading that right?
That's what it sounds like they're saying, but I don't know that. I honestly don't know in this particular case that is in fact. I don't know that is in fact the case. But I think we've made it very clear. The government, you don't get to say when you violate the law. You don't get to say we don't get to sue you when you break the law. I'm sorry, but that is the very definition of overstepping of powers.
Yes.
In my opinion. I don't understand how you could say, yeah, not only are we going to do this unconstitutional thing, but we are going to make it so that you are not allowed to sue us over it. I don't see anything like that legally being able to stand. Now, I'm not an attorney, but I do know on that list of names of organizations, I know there's a lot of attorneys that are employed by those groups.
Yes.
And I'm pretty sure if they say you can't do it, I'm pretty confident they've got some legal precedent and rulings that in their favor.
Yeah. Both the SAF and Firearms Policy Coalition have some brilliant attorneys that are associated with them, and I'm waiting to see if that injunction is granted. I'm really hoping that it is granted soon. And let's say we also have SAF, I know, has in Georgia and Minnesota, besides California, is suing on behalf of 18 to 21-year-olds.
We just actually, I believe there in one case, and I think it was Texas. Oh no, Texas was a carry case.
Yes.
Texas had to do with the restriction on the ability of 18 to 20-year-olds to carry, where Firearms Policy Coalition just got a pretty big victory over there. You're going to start to see, and once again, as you start to read through some of these decisions, you're going to start to see references to plain language, references to history and historical precedent. Anyway, it's going to be interesting as these decisions start to come down, because courts are going to have a very, very hard time not coming down on the side of firearms owners.
Yes, absolutely. As you said, especially in light of the Thomas opinion, in that they have to be the decisions have to be grounded in history, text, and tradition, going back to the 1790s.
Right.
And yeah,
last week ain't history.
Nope. The 1960s even aren't history.
No, especially if it was wrong.
Next story, again, we're going to stick with Firearms Policy Coalition. They did secure a victory in Vanderstock versus Garland. This is the and this again, if you want to look up that exact decision, it's at fpclegal.org. This is the ghost gun case that changes the ATF's rule that would create new terms and enact a slew of regulations for the agency to enforce. I just want to read from Judge Reed O'Connor's order. The definition of the term firearm in the Gun Control Act does not cover all firearm parts. It covers specifically the frame or receiver of any such weapon that Congress defined as a firearm. That which may become a receiver is not itself a receiver. That's saying you don't.
This is a 0% lower, right? This is a 0%er, all right? This, one day, all you need for this is a CNC machine and the knowledge to know how to do it. So therefore, under the law, under the rule, this right here could become a firearm. Therefore, it would have to be serialized. I could be arrested for being in possession of an unserialized, in California, unregistered weapon. And that's the problem, is that what he's saying is just because it could become a gun doesn't mean it will become a gun. And there's not really even, quite frankly, enough definition in the law to, okay, so could we expand this to include triggers? How about springs? I mean, this is what happens when you have people who don't know anything about guns writing gun law, right? Or inspiring gun law and saying, look, this is what we want to do. The other issue, quite frankly, here is that there is a very clear definition in statute. And when I say in statute, I mean in law, not in rules, which is an interpretation of the law. Now, so you don't get to, when there's a clear definition in statute, you don't get to just ignore that definition and write a definition that you want to use instead. You don't get to do that. And that was one of the very important things that was part of this decision. Now, mind you, there was also, at the same time the Supreme Court was ruling on all the gun issues, there was an issue with the EPA, the ruling dealing with the EPA, that basically said the same exact thing. Now, this is an example, to me, it's a combination of legislative laziness, because they're too lazy in some cases, they're too late. They've gotten too lazy to put clear definitions and understanding in the actual legislation, right? And the other part of it is executive overreach, because you now got the executive branch saying, well, we can fill in the blanks. You just give us something kind of general and we'll fill in the blanks. And then you can say that you did something really cool and got rid of, these firearms. And they basically then can redefine it in such a way, however they want, in order to get done whatever it is that they want.
Yeah, the way it works is Congress passes a law, lays out what exactly that law says, and then the EPA, the ATF, the federal branches that are in the executive branch are enforcing the law. They don't get to change the law. They don't get to interpret the law whatever the way they choose to see fit. They just, they have to follow the law, just like we do. We have to follow the law.
Funny how that works.
Yeah, no kidding.
But when you've gotten so used to it, in many of these cases, you've got people in the executive who've gotten so used to just ignoring the law. And this is one of the reasons why I definitely believe that if someone can prove or provide evidence that an elected official knew that what they were doing was either against the law or was unconstitutional, they ought to be able to be removed from office, at the very least, or at least brought up on criminal charges.
One would hope so. Going back to the last Legal Friday show that we had with Alex Uli, which was coming up on, it was a week and a half ago now, or almost, this Friday, Alex will be back with us again. So it'll be this coming Friday, it'll be 2 weeks ago. I said, there are some decisions that are coming down that are absolutely contrary to what Justice Thomas and the Supreme Court laid out in the New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin. What can be done to these federal justices? And from what Alex said, it is very, very, very little. A lifetime appointment means a lifetime appointment, and there's not much we can do against. Now, federal justices do not like being overturned, so they're going to try to, supposedly, they're going to try to stay within that framework by the Supreme Court. But it just to me, it hasn't seemed a lot of them have been stepping up and doing that.
No, you're 100% correct that they haven't. And well, just look at how Heller and McDonald were treated by lower courts. They flat out ignored them. I won't say flat out, but they came as close to ignoring them as you could possibly come to ignoring them. And I think that was one of the reasons why we had such comprehensive opinions this time in the New York pistol case, because they wanted to make it very clear where they stood. And unfortunately, it appears that in some cases they're still trying to get around that. Once again, I just think that you are derelict in your duties as an elected official when it's a violation of the oath of office. You take an oath of office to uphold the Constitution of the United States. And when the Supreme Court says this is unconstitutional and you do it anyway, you by definition are not upholding the Constitution of the United States.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. There ought to be a way. Maybe not. Tradition doesn't allow us to kick judges because they're not following the law, but we ought to be able to go to governors. We ought to be able to go to elected officials and say, this law, obviously unconstitutional. You passed it anyway. It's been ruled unconstitutional. You forfeit the rest of your term.
Completely agree. Completely agree.
And I'm trying to get this next article I had up there to load, but for some reason, my boss's website, Liberty Park Press, is down. It's not loading up. But I did see a story this morning off Liberty Park Press, written by, God, my brain is not working. Anyway, it's a story. New York Police Department, NYPD, is basically, if you're carrying a gun in New York, they're going to treat you guilty until proven otherwise. They're going to arrest you. They're going to take your gun until you can prove that A, you had a permit to carry that gun, and B, you were not in a non-permitted place. And
Really?
And Dave Workman, by the way, was the guy that wrote that. And I'm still trying to get that to come up. And I just cannot get that story.
I wish I could say that I was surprised by something like that. Yeah, unfortunately, a number of media news sites who use HostGator, who use the same hosting company, are all having the same issue. I actually Side note, yeah, I had a client just literally. That's why I logged in like 2 minutes before we went on, folks.
Oh, I was
'Cause
texting
I
him
was dealing with that for
furiously.
one of my clients. Yeah, I was working with one of my clients. So there are a number of sites that are down right now. So just an FYI, it may have something to do with the 117-degree temperatures we're having here in California. You know, being that we're all told around this time we're supposed to turn off all of our electrical gadgets and stuff, and we've got all the email servers going and the websites going, and I got my lights and my camera, and yeah, so I'm not exactly being a good
Oh, and by
Californian.
the way, don't charge your electric car until the temperature drops below 100. Yeah. And even then, oof. Anyway, and that's not guns, so we're going to leave it there.
Mm-hmm.
Just one more story I'm going to get to, and that is um, off of AL.com. Is an Alabama news story. The Alabama is getting constitutional carry. It goes into effect on January 1st. They passed it this spring. They will be number 25. You right now, this moment, have to have a permit to carry in Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
It's going away. And the sheriffs are just screaming that in some cases, 60% of their budget is going away because the people aren't renewing their permits that, oh, by the way, it's $20 a year to carry in Alabama. And then they're just doom and glooming. Oh, what are we going to do? We're losing all this money. If you have to, if I have to pay rent on my rights for you to have a sheriff's department, maybe you don't need that big of a sheriff's department. Or maybe you need to find another way to fund it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I get the point in terms of well, once again, it depends on how much you're funding a sheriff's department and how many permits in total you're talking. I get that you have to dedicate staff sometimes to actually both going through the background check process and doing everything you have to do to administer the program. I get that. Now, the question is, if you're not going to charge a fee, by the way, they're legally allowed to charge a fee in order to do that. Now, the fee is supposed to go to, once again, simply administer the program. What they're finding, like, for example, in places like California, we have this thing called, what's not so much with the permitting process, but with buying a gun, period. We have this thing called DROS, where you pay this fee and they have so much extra money in that DROS fund, right, that's supposed to go to background checks, that they're using that money and they're transferring that money over and using it to help confiscate firearms.
Wow.
Yes, exactly. Now, with concealed carry permits, so I get if you're going to have a program that you have to pay for it. Now, in California, there's a limitation. I think it's $100 and you pay it every 2 years. It's higher than it is in Alabama. But having said that, the process is relatively quick depending on the county you're in.
Yeah, I'm coming from a really free state where I have an enhanced carry permit that I didn't pay a penny for, including FBI background checks, including fingerprinting, any of that. After the training, I didn't pay a penny for my permit. And the state police here are fully funded. We're doing just fine. You've got to get your priorities right, legislatures. If you're relying on,
I'm willing to bet that your police don't have 3 directors of inclusion and equity.
No, I can just about guarantee you they don't even have one. Now, they have a training director. They have a director of standards, I'm sure, but...
Oh, yes. Standards when it comes to concealed carry, that's not a California thing. I don't know what to tell you. We don't need standards. We need equity and inclusion. And diversity. Don't forget diversity.
Oh. Now, I want...
And civil rights. Got to throw in a director of civil rights.
I want the best people that apply to become state police to become county sheriffs to become, all that. I don't care what their skin color is. It's just if you're among the best, we'll let you in. Finally getting some comments in. We think we hit a nerve here. George over the YouTube side says, make the carry permit free and tax Tesla owners.
Well, they can afford it.
I'm telling you, man.
I mean, come on. There you go. Tax the rich.
Of course, in Alabama, I don't know. I may be overgeneralizing here, but I always figured Alabama, outside of Birmingham, is very rural, very agricultural. And I've driven through Alabama a ton. I don't see that there's going to be a lot of Tesla owners to fill that base, but now
probably not. The majority of Teslas that are sold in the United States are sold in the state of California.
Well, I would say the vast majority. Even in South Dakota, I see one every once in a while up here. It's not. Mm-hmm. It's oh, there's a Tesla. It's like, wow, there's a Tesla. The first time I ever saw one. That doesn't happen. I'll see if I'm driving around. I'll see one or two a day. Now you see hundreds of Fords, thousands of other vehicles, but yeah, Teslas are not all that common. So we're coming up on the time we have.
Great comment, George.
We're also we're actually overtime again. Imagine that. Tell us about the rundown, and we're still two mornings a week with Morning Coffee with Craig?
2 mornings a week, Morning Coffee with Craig. You'll find us at the Firearms Policy Coalition. You can find us wherever you are on social media. Just look for @GunPolicy. You can also find me on the Rundown Monday through Friday, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern. The Rundown 2A News and Conservative Views. I do the show with Mike Pilwarski of Arms Room Radio, who, by the way, is usually the guest on Thursday on the same weeks that I'm the guest on Tuesday here on The Bullet. So, you guys probably already know Mike, or should already know Mike.
You should already know Mike. Mike was the only Thursday commentator I had for a long time before Matt came in. So, but yeah, now I relieved some of his stresses on Thursdays. Now he's only in every other Thursday. And by the way, he's coming in this Saturday too. So Thursday and Saturday this week, you get Mike Piwowarski. For me, yeah, just continue tuning in 5 p.m. Central Time all this week and on noon on Saturday. Thanks for watching, everybody, and we will see you next time.